Most people who are struggling with depersonalization symptoms are trapped by this one fear that comes in their mind over and over again. That is, what if this is permanent? What if I've permanently messed up my mind? What if my brain is broken? And it's something that I see quite often with my past coaching clients. And I realized something very strange because when I thought back to my own recovery journey from depersonalization symptoms, and it took me 10 years to recover, the weird thing is, I never really had that fear of it being permanent. And that made me start questioning why. What was it that happened that made it different for me? At the beginning, that question did a kind of appear in my mind, but it never became a constant fear. It was there maybe once or twice, and then it went away and didn't come back. So I started questioning why, what happened. The other strange thing I realized, this is a pattern I see often with people with depersonalization, is they keep going back to those forums, right, to look for answers. You may be one of these people where you went to a forum today to look for cures, to look for reassurance, and that's completely understandable. The weird thing is, again, I only did that a little bit, and then it didn't feel right to me to keep going to those forums. I didn't feel the answers were there. So that made me realize, okay, there is something different that happened or that I did in the past, and I realized I can share that with you to help you overcome that fear. So in this video, I'm going to show you why your mind is lying to you when it makes you think that depersonalization is permanent, because it's not. And by the end of this video, you're going to see how depersonalization is not permanent and what keeps that fear going. Because once you really understand this, everything will change for you for the better, and you will not be trapped by that fear anymore. The first thing to understand, and this was a big one for me because it took me a long time to really understand it. When you have depersonalization, remember this is an anxiety and stress-based condition. So what does that mean? It means that your mind and body are already in a threat state, but it's not a mild threat. Your mind and body believe that you are under constant threat. But the threat isn't just from things that could be in the external world, it's from the symptoms themselves as well. When you are in that state, it's not just a simple fight, flight, freeze response state. It's like a more elevated version of that. So that means you are in high levels of stress. Your mind is in a survival state. Certain things happen in the mind and the body when you shift into that state. And a big one of these is that your sense of time isn't really there. And I bet you can relate to that, right? Think now, even today or the last week, the amount of times that you forgot something, the amount of times your concentration went, and you couldn't really judge how much time has passed. Maybe even you felt like time was missing. There's a reason for that. It's not just because you're so focused on the symptoms, but your mind is in that survival state, which means it's only really focused on the now, on minute to minute, hour to hour survival. Why is that important to understand? You see, because it's focused on what is a potential threat now. So that timekeeper, we can call it in your mind, isn't really working in long-term thinking. It's focused only on short-term. So that means it thinks, am I safe now? No? Then we must be not safe completely. So in a way you could say it's not able to think so far ahead and think, well, I've been safe for 6 months. I've been safe for 8 months or even years. I must be safe by now. It doesn't see it like that. It's only thinking of, am I feeling safe right now? If the answer is no, oh, well then maybe it's permanent. You can see how the mind starts coming up with those thoughts when it's in that short-term survival thinking. But remember this key thing, and this is really important for you to remember. Just because you feel that it's permanent doesn't mean that it is. Just because your mind creates those fears doesn't mean it's true. When you're in that survival state, when you have high levels of anxiety and stress, your mind will catastrophize, right? So it will think of worst case scenarios because it thinks it's protecting you, because it thinks you are in a non-stop survival situation. And then here's the really frustrating thing that I experienced, and I've seen other people as well, like past clients have experienced too, which is the very thing you believe you are doing to stay safe, the very thing your mind is doing to stay safe, is actually the thing keeping you stuck, which goes back to the idea of it being permanent. You've probably heard it before, right? That focusing on the symptoms keeps them going. I'm going to show you a better way of thinking about it so it really lands for you. So imagine you have an itch, right? Let's say you have really, really dry skin as an example, and your hand gets really, really itchy. So you have that urge to itch it, and it just won't go away. And no matter what you do, you try and ignore it, but the itch is still there. So you go to the doctor and you say, look, I started itching it because I couldn't help it. How do I stop it itching? And the doctor will say, just stop itching it. The issue isn't it being itchy. So it's actually an underlying issue, which is you have dry skin, right? And let's imagine that there was no cream for it. And imagine the doctor said, all you need to do is just keep hydrating more, get to the root of the issue. The issue isn't the dry skin, it's the lack of hydration. You can probably see where this is going, right? If not, I'm going to reveal it now. Because if the doctor told you, just stop itching, completely ignore the itchiness, keep drinking water and it'll go away, you would know, oh, okay, I just have to do that. But then if you kept itching it, and if you kept focusing on the itch and obsessing over it, that's going to stress you out more. And is that really going to help your body? No. So by constantly itching it, you keep it going. That is what is happening with many people who have depersonalization disorder. Because every time you believe the thought of it being permanent, every time you believe the feeling and the fear of it being permanent, every time you focus on the symptoms in a fearful way, you are sending that signal. You are itching the depersonalization by sending a signal of unsafety. So every time you focus on it and go, oh my God, this is dangerous, which is understandable, but if you keep getting in that habit, your mind goes, oh, they're saying this is dangerous. They keep focusing on it. So then I'm going to send them the signal of anxiety and stress because it must be scary. That's why we keep focusing on it all the time in a fearful way. And then what do you think will happen? This is how that loop occurs. Because then without realizing, you keep it going, and then that's why it feels like it's permanent. Because you are not realizing that you are perpetuating it, so you are keeping it going without realizing. And there is no shame in that, because this is not something that is easy to overcome to begin with, but it can be learned. And I went through it. I see all the time people go through it too. This is not something to be ashamed of, because I did experience that shame on realizing, oh my God, I'm actually, without realizing, doing things to keep it going. But that doesn't mean that it's your fault, because nobody really teaches this in the mainstream, right? This is something that is not as intuitive to understand. It's like the opposite of what we are normally taught. Because then the other frustrating thing that can happen, and I see other people do, and to a certain extent I did a little bit, but I overcame it early on, is people don't realize that they have what's known as learned helplessness. So this means that for whatever reason, and again, it's nobody's fault, people can have life experiences where they end up being like this. We can end up having a fixed mindset. So this is like being in a state of powerlessness where even though we don't realize that we are keeping the depersonalization going, or we don't realize we have a lifestyle and habits that are keeping us stressed and anxious, we end up thinking we have no power to change the situation. So what can happen is people have learned over time that they have no power, so they think they're helpless. An example of this, I used to do this in the past, is having bad sleep habits, like staying up late, for example, and then doing that day after day, which is going to impact your nervous system. It's going to make you more stressed. And then you go, oh, why do I have depersonalization? Why have I got stress and anxiety? Because you're not meeting your body's needs. Or maybe you haven't been taught how to set healthy boundaries. So there are people in your life that are constantly triggering you and constantly making you feel anxious. And it's a horrible experience, right? When you don't know how to set boundaries if nobody taught you. This is an example again of that itch, because through not just thought patterns or how you relate to your emotions, but through actual habits and lifestyles, you continuously create further stress and anxiety by mistake. And then we end up thinking, oh my God, it keeps staying here. Is it permanent? No, it's not permanent. It only appears to be that way because you don't realize you are doing things to feed it. You could say that recovery is not about forcing the itch to go away. It's about having the discipline to stop itching it. This also means every time you keep Googling symptoms, you keep going on the forums, every time you keep monitoring the symptoms constantly and checking if it's there, that's like itching it as well. And what I noticed is it can be easy for people who are very deep in that learned helplessness mindset to think, well, that's just how it is. I can't change it. That's just how life is. Without realizing, no, that's a limiting belief that they have. And people recover quite often. It's once they understand the principles on how to recover and then they take action. That's what leads to recovery, which is why it's not permanent. Because I'm going to answer now the question I said at the beginning. Why was it different for me? Why did I not really believe it was permanent early on and that fear never really came? So I'm going to tell a story now, and it may sound a bit shocking and surprising. About 2 or 3 years into me having depersonalization disorder, as well as all those other issues like maladaptive daydreaming, high anxiety, as you can imagine, depression, and video game addiction, when I was knee deep in that depersonalization symptoms and I was there obsessing over it, focusing on it, fearing it, I had a shocking 3 to 5 hour window where the symptoms disappeared completely. And at the time, I did not understand what happened. And it actually came back the next day, but that didn't lead me to think it's permanent. The opposite happened because I realized, okay, clearly there's something that I did or something happened that made it go away. And that then really led me to going, okay, there's an answer to this. I can find out what caused it and how to recover. The other very good, fortunate thing that happened was I happened to be in the same city as the only depersonalization specialist in the UK, which is where I live in. And at the time, that was the only one. Maybe things have changed now. This was a long time ago. This was like 15 years ago that I saw that specialist. So early on, he told me exactly what depersonalization is and the general idea of how it worked, because back then, they still didn't have a huge amount of information like they do now. But because early on he told me, yeah, I see people recover, I see people get a lot better, and yeah, I think you can recover. Right from the start, I did not have this belief of it being permanent because I had strong evidence from that specialist that, yeah, people recover. So that also helped me to understand that going on the forums is not really useful in the long run. If you look at what specialists say, when you see constant evidence, oh, people recover, oh, you can actually make improvements, you no longer have that fear then because you understand why it keeps going on for long periods of time for people, and you understand there are things in your power you can do to recover. So that meant early on, I didn't spend my time fearing, is it permanent? I was focused on, I need to find the answers of how to get out. So I knew the exit existed. What I needed to figure out was, how do I get to the exit? How do I enter the door to get out of this? And one of the key things I learned from the specialist was they got me to note I think it was like every hour, 2 hours, what my symptoms were like. So that means I wasn't focused on it all the time, but at set points. And I realized the symptoms fluctuated, so they weren't always constant. And it made me realize, yes, there are some things that happened that made me more stressed, that made it worse, but there were some things I could do that made it actually get a bit better. Even though it was maybe like 2% better or even 10% better to begin with, just the fact that I saw direct evidence that it can even get slightly better and there's a logical reason for it, again, that meant that I never developed that fear of it being permanent, which meant I never developed that belief of, oh, is my mind broken? I understood it's a temporary condition that you can overcome. But the biggest turning point in my recovery journey happened about halfway through. So about 5 years into the recovery journey, where for those 5 years, I was mostly getting better to a certain extent. So things weren't as bad as they first were, and the symptoms weren't as strong, but they were still there. But I could live generally a normal life, and I was able to get some enjoyment out of life. But I was really just getting better at managing things. But then I made one single decision that absolutely improved everything for me, not just with depersonalization symptoms, but for my whole life. And would you believe it? It was when I decided to start meditating every day. And if that sounds strange, I'm going to reveal to you now why actually it was a game changer for me, and I believe for many people it can be for you too. Because what I've realized, especially when working with people directly who have depersonalization and other mental health issues, we as a species, as in humans, without realizing, we have a habit of just believing every thought that comes into our mind. And we end up believing that we are our mind. But this is a problem, right? Because our mind creates all kinds of questions, all kinds of statements, all kinds of stories. And how much of it is really true? How much of it is actually beneficial for us? Think about it. How many times have you thought something was the case and it turned out it wasn't true or it wasn't accurate? Quite a lot of times, right? Or even when it comes to your emotions, we have a habit of what's called emotional reasoning. So we feel a certain way and we believe, oh, it must be that this is the case. But again, how many times have you felt something was a certain way and you look back in hindsight and realize, oh, that wasn't actually quite like that, or oh, actually, I was wrong. I felt that way, but that wasn't true. Probably quite a number of times, right? So, what is the problem then? We identify with our thoughts, so we end up believing we are our thoughts. As I've said many times on this channel, you are not your thoughts, you are the awareness of your thoughts. So, meditation taught me from doing every day that you are a point of awareness that experiences thoughts and experiences emotions in your body. They are part of you, but they do not define you. So, what I like to see as your emotions are your body's way of experiencing your mind, and your thoughts come from different parts of your mind. If you see it in that way, that these are parts of you but not you, you will be able to much easily overcome depersonalization, and especially fear of it being permanent. Because when you don't believe every fearful thought, then you don't take it so seriously all the time and you can question it. So this next thing might be a bit difficult to hear, but it's important because this is the thing that makes the difference between someone being stuck for years in depersonalization and those who can recover in months. You see, I grew up without a dad being around to support me. So that means that I never really had a safety net. So you can imagine that if you grow up in a situation where you don't really have a safety net, there is a certain amount of support that you're not getting that most other people probably get. This means you learn early on from a young age, I have to take responsibility, otherwise no one is going to be there to save me, that I have to save myself. And in some life situations, yes, you get support from other family, and I'm very lucky that I had support in other ways from other family too. But when it's something internal in you, when it's a mental health issue, you are the only one that can affect your own mind and your own body in that way. So that meant I understood early on, there's no backup plan. I can't afford to not overcome this. I had to overcome it no matter what. So that meant I had this very, very strong drive. Eventually, maybe not to begin with, but eventually I had a strong drive to figure out how to overcome this. Because what I see people do is when they are in a comfortable life situation, which is good in many ways, there is a trap, however, because too much comfort means your mind does this thing which we can call a risk-benefit analysis, or even a cost-benefit analysis, where it thinks, well, I've been in depersonalization and chronic stress and anxiety for, let's say, 3 years. I'm actually surviving okay. I know what this is like. Yeah, it feels like hell. Every day it feels like a nightmare. But I know it, and there's a bizarre sense of safety that the mind and nervous system experience with that. I know it sounds a bit weird, but that's how it works. So what happens is when you are presented with answers of, okay, this is how you get out, if you're so used to being in depersonalization and anxiety, the mind has adapted to that. So then it ends up preferring to stay in the known hell instead of walking a path that could lead to heaven. And that heaven is having no depersonalization and none of the chronic anxiety. So it prefers the known hell over the unknown heaven. This means that when the mind creates impulses of, no, I'm not going to try that thing to recover because it's out of my comfort zone. I'm going to do it next week or next month. That's what keeps people stuck. And then what does the mind do? Going back to the permanent fear, it creates these thoughts of, no, this is permanent, so don't even try and recover. But again, it's lying to you because it's doing that because it thinks it keeps you safe. And this is a trap that people fall into because it's safer to believe, I can't do anything, I'm just going to survive on what I know, than to go, okay, I'm going to take responsibility and I'm going to keep taking small steps to try to recover. For the mind that's been used to being stuck in that unknown hell, it's actually scarier to try to go out of the comfort zone. Some of you may not want to hear that, but I wouldn't be doing my job as a YouTuber and a coach if I wasn't being honest with you. And I know exactly where you are right now. You've been stuck with depersonalization for so long that it feels almost normal, right? And you almost can't conceive of life without it. And that also feeds into the idea of it being permanent. But I'm here to tell you, you haven't lost anything. You may feel that your personality is gone, you may feel that your life is gone, but it hasn't. Everything is waiting there for you to take back. Because remember, this is a protective survival state that stems from the nervous system. I want to tell you that from somebody who had depersonalization for 10 years, you do not want to be in depersonalization hell for another year. It's not something that you deserve to experience. You deserve to experience freedom. But you have a choice. You don't have to experience it for 10 years. It took so long for me because I didn't have a map to guide me out of that hell. So I had to do a lot of my own work, study, and research because in 2010, when I started having depersonalization, there just wasn't that kind of information around. But now, in 2026, there is so much information, and people like me do exist where we can guide you out of this hell. And going back to the idea of scratching the itch on your hand, you don't want to be here in 2036 still scratching the itch. You have a choice now to start changing everything in your life. You have a choice now to end this hell of depersonalization disorder. So to help you out, I've created a free one-page PDF guide of this video, so that way you can always look back to it so you know how to deal with this issue of the fear of it being permanent. So if you want to avoid the trap of having depersonalization for years and years and years, and if you want to collapse that timeline into something that's more like months, I do one-on-one coaching where I work with people just like you. So click the link below in the pinned comment and the description and book a free clarity call with me where we can have a chat and I can see how I can help you in your recovery journey. And if you want to learn more about depersonalization recovery, check out this video here or this video here that I'll put for more information on how I recovered. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to click the like and subscribe button and also click the notification bell so you can be notified of when I release the next video. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care.